welcome to another Northern Monkeys datasheet review. This time we're looking at the Invader ATV, which is a weird little model and a weird little datasheet, but there's a lot to be said for it on the tabletop. So here it is, the Primaris golf cart, kind of zipping around the battlefield. This thing came out in 9th edition and I think had a very controversial start. One, because everybody was like, what the hell is this? And two, because there was some weird quirk of the rules where like apothecaries could revive them and they could come in squads of 3. So there was like a, flash in the pan 2-second window where they were like briefly the meta, and a bunch of idiots went out and bought 19 of them. Unfortunately, well, rather fortunately for everyone else, unfortunately for them, GW fixed that. But now in 10th edition, it's a funny little thing. It's a unit that you can have on your own, or it can be attached to some outriders. But yeah, it went down in points recently, down to 60 points, which I think, outside of characters, makes it the cheapest Marine unit. And you get a lot of bang for that buck. Stats-wise, there's a lot of good stuff to talk about here. It's move 12, like the bikes, and it's got quite a small profile to it. It's like quite a little square, so it's very, very nippy, very quick to get around. And with T5, 8 wounds, it's actually, surprisingly tough for 60 points as well. It's a bit of a bargain. I'd say it's definitely tougher than a squad of scouts. Has OC2, so it can muscle characters off objectives. And stats-wise, just for 60 points, it's an absolute bargain. The main thing you want to use this thing for is its manoeuvrability, but it does also have a surprising number of shots. It's got 5 attacks in combat, which is a little bit outrageous, to be honest. I don't know. There should be 6 or 4. Like, come on, GW, make up your mind. What's happening with these 2 intercessors that are driving this thing? And then it's got either the Onslaught Gatling Cannon, which is 8 shots, or the Multi-Melter. Now, the cool thing is, with the it has up to 10 shots for firing off all those bullets. So it can actually be a fairly efficient chaff shedder. But it can also just completely sort of spike its damage with that multi-melter, and just this little 60-point unit nipping around can just do way more damage than you might expect. Now, my experience with this thing is as like a kind of a lone piece on its own. Its ability for that reason is a little bit meh. Basically, if something shoots it once per turn, it can shoot back at the thing that fired at it. Now, like I said, it's quite durable. T5, 8 wounds, a 3-up save. It's nothing to sniff at. It's mounted, so it can benefit from cover. So yeah, your opponent might actually have a hard time dealing with this thing in a single shot without committing something like ridiculously large to it, like an entire vehicle. So yeah, I'd say the ability is actually quite nice. It just gives you the chance to just get some damage out of nowhere that you might not expect. However, I'd say 9 times out of 10 this doesn't come up in my games. So it either dies or it's never targeted. But not being, making your opponent think twice and leaving this little utility piece that you only paid 60 points for, it's actually quite good. And don't forget, I think this is something to remember with most Marine things, it has the grenades keyword, so it's always got that potential to kind of zip up into the enemy lines and just cause some mortal wounds where your opponent might not want to. Now, in terms of the loadout, the only real option you have on this thing is the machine gun versus the melter. As I said, the 10 shots between the bolter and the chain cannon are actually quite cool, and the dev wounds means that you can always, you've got a decent probability that you're going to proc our dev wound. So if there's something like some big vehicle sat there on 1 wound, maybe the ATV is the perfect thing to finish it off. But I much prefer the higher risk, higher reward multi-melter, just because this little 60-point unit can it can cause some absolutely devastating stuff. Which we'll talk about now. So I actually think this thing is probably one of the better Marine units. I think it's much reviled for reasons outside of its rules. But yeah, it's a cheap, fast scoring piece that's surprisingly tough and actually has some guns on it, which is, what more can you ask for? Now, what's really cool about this guy is you can kind of always deploy him in a way that he can nip forward and do things like cleanse and secure no man's land and things like that early game. Just because he's so fast and has that kind of small little rectangular profile, he can sort of hide behind a ruin and then get out and do those objectives, which means you're not having to spend your more expensive, more valuable infantry bricks doing with Marines. So really, really nice there. That's definitely like one of the ways you could use him, is just that early game, like, yeah, I'm going to pay 120 points for two ATVs that are basically going to screen, do cleanse, do secure no man's land, do, locust, things like that. And you just don't have to sort of think about scoring. And you can have like, two ATVs and a unit of scouts, and you're like, right, I no longer think about scoring in this game. I just keep the scouts alive, use the ATVs as throwaways, and you're good. You can spend the other 1800 points on your army of blasting. I think that's genuinely one way to go with them. And I think you see this more and more. There's a recent on YouTube, if you're going Art of War, they run like an in-house tournament, which, for those that don't know, Art of War are one of the like big competitive channels on YouTube. They probably have like most of the best players in the world sort of in their streams. And they did a in-house tournament, and the guy that was did really well. I think you'll see he's got a few games that you can watch for free. Triple ATVs in his list, or at least double ATVs. But yeah, he uses them really well. He just uses them exactly as that kind of like cheap scoring, blocking piece. So yeah, if there's ever going to be like a kind of a big thumbs up from this unit in terms of actual like really competitive 40k, I don't think you can get much better than that. Personally, I use them a little bit differently. I tend to use them in reserves. I just think they're a good, if you've got stuff like assault intercessors or jump packs, but I really like the idea of using them to get stuck in. I don't particularly like them like fiddling about doing actions. So you can have 60 points, you can put this guy in strategic reserves, just have him come down and blast something. And don't forget, with New Oath, that multi-melt is actually very, very dangerous. The picture in the top left here is taken after the fact, but there was a Vindicator pushing up on this flank. But the ATV comes in from reserves, the Vindicator's the Oath target. And it's like, well, you're hitting on 3s, re-rolling, wounding on 4s now, so you're like odds on to get like melter wound through, which you can't come through in melter range from reserves, but it's still a D6 damage, AP4. It's all really good stuff. So yeah, just think the value that it has, the fact that it came in here, I rolled quite well, and it just happens to be, oh yeah, the ATV just does like 9 damage and just, destroys this thing after it's been weakened by some, anti-tank mines. It's just cool, like, for 60 points, you can't go wrong with it, really. Like, and if it comes in and does nothing, like, okay, 60 points, it's not the worst thing in the world. Your opponent still has to dedicate something substantial to killing it. I mean, I've had these things literally tank a volley from a Lehman Russ battle tank just because you use armor of contempt on them and the last cannon missed. It's like, it's not the craziest thing in the world for it to survive stuff like that. So yeah, I think they're just a great unit. I can't really recommend them more, other than perhaps the model itself. So there's a few different places you can look for like which detachment this guy goes in best. And I think it's generally worth having the conversation. I think the obvious place though is Stormlance. This is sort of the place for any and all mounted units. It's just perfect for them. And you get those big bricks of Outriders with Chaplain in them. There's the Ride Hard, Rise Fast stratagem that gives them -1 to hit and wound in the shooting phase. And there's another stratagem that lets them make a reactive move. So they just genuinely become very, very tricky for your opponent to deal with. And if you add an ATV into the mix, it just, for a mere 60 points, you add another 8 wounds onto them. That essentially stops 2 of your Outriders from being able to be killed. So that's really, if you're wanting these big bricks with the ATV attached, that's definitely the place you want to go. Now, in terms of just running these little ATVs around on their own, actually, there's 2 that really, really work for them. The Firestorm, they give them advance and shoot, which adds to their speed. It might be the difference between getting in melter range and not. And if you get close enough, which you're generally going to want to with these guys, you get the extra strength. It just might be a +1 to wound, which can stack with Oath, because it's not actually a +1 to wound, it's just an extra bit of strength. And Ironstorm, this gives you the detachment rule itself. Here is what benefits you, where you get a re-roll on either a hit, a wound, or a damage. With these lots of small units of ATVs running around, this could just really, really up their potency. It was a lot like what we saw last edition with Eldar, this edition with Eldar, having that re-roll, running these small units about. Really, really optimal, and it just makes that 60-point unit kind of, I feel like it's already too cheap, and this just makes them feel kind of ridiculous in terms of their efficiency. So, lastly, usually at this point we talk about leaders, but it's not really relevant for this guy. There's like one Space Marine like mounted character, the what is it, the chaplain on bike, and he doesn't really benefit the ATV that well. Like his main thing is that he gives his unit like dev wounds and shooting. This thing already has dev wounds on or AP4 on its shooting. You know, it's not something to really sing home about. I think one thing that is quite cool is you can run the Dark Angel character on the big grav jet bike thing. We run him with Outriders, and he benefits from their extra damage and strength on the charge. So that's pretty cool. But what I really want to talk about is how this was one of the first models I noticed, really, that when it came out and everyone was like, ew, what is this? And like, I got one because it was cheap. I can't remember. I just like picked it up somewhere for like a bargain. I was like, why not? I'll paint up the Mario Kart. It's grown on me a little, you know. I think something about the Games Workshop paint style and art style kind of makes it look worse than it is. But it is still, I don't know. It's an odd duck. Let's just say that. And also, people don't talk about this. You know, everyone was going crazy when the Rogel Dawn came out and it had that big hole in the bottom of it. The ATV has that too. You know, it's not the first unit that suffers from that. So, yeah, the ATV got a big hole on its bottom. You know, read into that what you will. Now, the thing about this though is loads of people have sort of tried to fix it. You can see there's been there's a couple of up in the top left. There's a YouTube channel, Origin Painting. He did these great like grav fixes, which I think genuinely, if this thing had come out as a grav vehicle, people would have liked it a lot more. Just like if the Gladiator tanks had have come out and not been a grav vehicle, people would have liked them a lot more. I think that's definitely the case where this thing and the Outriders should have been flying. I think it would have been a lot cooler. And then loads of third parties, like the Grimdark Bits on the top right there, and Station Forge, have both made, like, I think, cooler ATVs. Maybe that one on the Grimdark Bits one, I don't know, that's a bit of they've got like a very much their unique style of Space Marines that they do, but I still think that thing looks, sort of the profile is way better. And obviously the big chunky Jeep there, just a lot cooler. But yeah, I think it's something I'd like to make a video about, just like the models that the community is widely kind of, I don't know, disrespected as they've come out. You know, GW makes some absolutely fantastic sculpts, but I think this thing is one of those things where most people go, I do not like this model. I think it looks stupid and doesn't fit with the range. There's all the jokes about the guy, the pilot, being completely deaf as a minigun fires right above his head. Which, yeah, it's a bit of a design flaw there, but I guess his little helmet keeps him safe. I don't know. I just think it's quite funny, just the amount of other sculpts there is available of this thing. You know, I've made this sort of on the off the cuff when I looked for art of this thing and realised art doesn't exist because GW never made any art. The fans don't seem to have made any art. Like, this thing's not inspiring them. And then there's all these different third-party sculpts. I just thought it was really funny, just this universal rejection of this thing by the community. But if you're a number one ATV enjoyer, let us know in the comments down below what you like about it. And yeah. So thanks for watching. Just a sort of another datasheet review here. I don't hate the ATV. Like, once I got the model and actually put it together and painted it, I was like, yeah, it looks fine. And I think in terms of an actual gameplay piece, it's probably one of the better Marine units. But I think, back of my mind, I totally understand why people don't like that. So anyway, regardless of where you stand on the ATV, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe. Try and produce more content like this. And yeah, have a good week.